On Friday, a $400 million luxury jet gifted by the government of Qatar landed at Joint Base Andrews, and the president called it the most luxurious plane ever built. What almost nobody reported clearly is what happens to that plane when he leaves office, and it is not what you'd assume. The Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, repainted at a cost of at least $14 million in a color the president personally selected, is currently bright green with algae, and the new sealant is tearing. And in Lebanon, technical level talks are scheduled to continue today, 2 days after Israeli strikes killed at least 47 people, the second deadliest day of that conflict, which happened 48 hours after Trump signed a deal declaring the war over on all fronts. Let's go through all three, because the detail that matters here got buried under the spectacle of Friday's unveiling. The Boeing 747-8, gifted by the Qatari royal family last July, and accepted over objections from ethics experts and members of Congress in both parties, arrived at Joint Base Andrews on Friday, ahead of schedule. Trump toured the aircraft, called it the world's most luxurious plane, and said, when it was built at a level that will probably never be seen again. He thanked the Emir of Qatar directly. The jet will serve as a bridge Air Force One until Boeing delivers 2 long-promised replacement aircraft, expected sometime in 2028. Here's what NPR, CBS, and ABC all confirmed, in slightly different phrasing buried well below the unveiling footage. ABC News reported it most directly. The plane is to be used as the new Air Force One until shortly before he leaves office, at which time ownership of the plane will be transferred to the Donald J. Trump Presidential Library Foundation, according to sources familiar with the arrangement. Read that sequence again slowly. A foreign government, Qatar, gifted a $400 million aircraft to the United States government, accepted on behalf of the country, retrofitted using hundreds of millions more in taxpayer funds, used as the literal flying symbol of the American presidency for roughly 2 years. And when Trump's term ends, that plane does not return to the Air Force fleet, does not get reassigned to government service, does not become a museum piece under federal custody, like the outgoing 747s Trump mentioned Friday. It goes to his personal Presidential Library Foundation, a private entity that, as we discussed earlier this month regarding the Obama Presidential Center, operates entirely outside NARA's federal record-keeping and is not subject to the same public records obligations or congressional oversight that come with government property. Trump defended the original gift last year by posting that it would be stupid to turn down a free plane, and that only a fool would not accept this gift on behalf of our country. That framing, on behalf of our country, is the operative phrase, and it's the one that makes the ownership transfer significant. The plane was accepted as a national asset, justified using the language of national benefit, paid for in its retrofitting using public funds. The exit plan converts it into a private asset, belonging to a foundation that bears his name and serves his legacy. The gift entered as a public good. It appears set to leave as personal property. Nobody at Friday's unveiling, not Trump, not the Air Force officials present, not the assembled press pool, said a word about that detail on camera. It surfaced as a single-sourced line, deep in the ABC News write-up, attributed to people familiar with the proposed arrangement. A $400 million foreign gift, retrofitted with public money, defended as a patriotic acceptance on behalf of our country, scheduled to end its life as the private property of a foundation carrying the president's own name. That arc deserves a headline of its own. It got a sentence. Now the reflecting pool, which is genuinely one of the more darkly comic stories of governance failure I've covered this month, and which still carries real stakes about how public money gets spent and who gets blamed when it goes wrong. Trump launched an effort to fix what he called the terrible condition of the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool, ahead of the country's 250th anniversary celebrations this summer. He personally selected the color for the pool's resurfacing: American flag blue. Federal contracts for the project, awarded without competitive bidding, were valued at more than $14 million. Some reporting puts the figure at $16 million. The pool was drained, the basin resurfaced with the darker coating, and refilled earlier this month. Within days, the water turned bright green. CBS News described it plainly: algae, turning the water a fluorescent green hue. A University of Virginia satellite analysis commissioned by the Washington Post found more algae in the pool this month than at any point in the past 5 years. Then, on top of the algae, a tear appeared in the new sealant material on the floor of the pool. The exact $14 million coating Trump had personally chosen, visible through the green water on June 18th. The scientific explanation is not actually mysterious or scandalous on its own. Algal biotechnology experts told multiple outlets that darker surfaces absorb more solar radiation, raise local water temperature, and create more favorable conditions for algae growth. Exactly the kind of basic, foreseeable engineering consideration that should have been part of choosing a darker paint color for a shallow, sun-exposed outdoor pool in a Washington, D.C. summer. A swimming pool specialist who goes by Swimming Pool Steve called it new pond syndrome, a well-documented, entirely predictable phenomenon when you restart a still, open-air body of water. This wasn't an act of God, it was an act of insufficiently considered engineering on a project specifically chosen to deliver a personal aesthetic preference, awarded without the competitive bidding process that might have surfaced these foreseeable risks before $14 million was spent. Here's the part that turns mild farce into something worth real scrutiny. The Interior Department's official response, through its communications director and in statements to multiple outlets, was not to acknowledge the engineering miscalculation. It was to blame the previous administration. An Interior Department spokesperson told Newsweek, versus previous administrations. The National Park Service is actually maintaining the beautifully completed reflecting pool. Most infamously, the Obama pool reopening that resulted in massive algae clumps. Another statement to CBS called the current administration's predecessors' efforts the failed and extremely costly attempt by Obama and Biden. For the record, the pool's most recent major prior renovation, a $34 million project, was completed in 2012, during the Obama administration. Yes, but algae returning after a major pool renovation is, per every water treatment expert quoted across this story, an expected and recurring phenomenon, not a partisan failure. It happened in 2012, it's happening now. The difference this time is a $14 million no-bid contract for a cosmetic color change that a civil engineer interviewed by NPR diplomatically noted raises questions about their process, and an administration response that reaches for blaming a president who left office 5 years before this particular tear in this particular sealant appeared. When the engineering goes wrong on your own watch, on a project you personally specified the color for, blaming the guy from 2012 isn't an explanation. It's a deflection, and it's notable that it's the administration's first and loudest instinct. And finally, back to Lebanon, where today's scheduled technical-level talks are happening against a backdrop that should make everyone skeptical of how durable any of this actually is. I covered Friday's developments in detail yesterday. Israel killed at least 47 people in Lebanon, the second deadliest day of the entire conflict, less than 48 hours after Trump signed the U.S.-Iran memorandum at Versailles, a document that explicitly declared the immediate and permanent termination of military operations on all fronts, including in Lebanon. Iran suspended the broader U.S.-Iran talks in response. J.D. Vance's trip to Geneva was postponed. A renewed Israel-Hezbollah ceasefire was brokered Friday afternoon under pressure from the U.S. and Qatar, one that, critically, does not require Israel to withdraw from the buffer zone it controls inside southern Lebanese territory. Pakistan's foreign ministry confirmed today that U.S. and Iranian teams are set to resume technical-level talks, a notable downgrade in both formality and ambition from the signing ceremonies and presidential-level negotiations of the past 2 weeks. NPR's framing of where things actually stand is the most honest available. Fighting in Lebanon and unresolved claims over the Strait of Hormuz threaten a tentative agreement. Tentative is the operative word. On day 102 of a war that has now been declared over, in public, by the President of the United States, at least 5 separate times, at a UFC event, at Versailles, in a digital pre-signing, in a planned Geneva ceremony that got canceled, and now in technical-level talks that are explicitly a step down from any of those. I'm not going to re-walk the entire MOU's substantive gaps again today. I've made that case repeatedly this month, and the gaps haven't changed. The uranium gets diluted rather than removed. The missile program isn't addressed. The proxy network isn't addressed. And Lebanon's all fronts language has now been directly contradicted by the actual deadliest week since the deal was signed, reality on the ground. What's worth adding today is simply this. Technical level talks is diplomatic language for we are no longer at the stage where principles show up. That is not necessarily catastrophic. Technical talks are how implementation details actually get worked out. But it is a quiet admission that the theater of the past 2 weeks, the Versailles dinner, the planned Vance trip, the multiple staged signings, has given way to working-level negotiators trying to figure out whether any of it can actually hold, after the week's body count made clear that the documents alone weren't doing that work. 3 stories today that share something specific. A gap between the publicly stated purpose of something and its actual, less publicized destination. A jet accepted on behalf of our country is set to end up as a private foundation's asset. A pool renovation justified as a patriotic beautification project for the 250th anniversary produced a $14 million algae bloom that the responsible agency blamed on an administration that left office in 2017. And a war declared over on all fronts produced its second deadliest day within 48 hours of that declaration. Now downgraded to technical level talks because the principal's signatures didn't change what was happening on the ground. In each case, the stated story and the documented story diverge in a specific, traceable way, not through outright falsehood, but through what gets said loudly and what gets buried in a single source sentence, or blamed on someone else, or quietly downgraded once reality didn't cooperate with the announcement. That gap has been this entire month's story. Today, it's a plane, a pool, and a ceasefire, and all 3 tell exactly the same one.